Welcome to Beyond the Needle, the Aesthetics Business Podcast. Each week, I'm here to share real, actionable strategies and bring on expert guests to help you level up, attract more patients, and build a standout brand. Let's turn your passion into a thriving business together. Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Beyond the Needle podcast, where we talk about the business side of aesthetics in a way that's practical, honest, and actually useful. And today I'm going somewhere a little different. You may have listened to my episode that I did, I don't even know now, probably 4 or 5 months ago about procrastination. And I wanted to create a bit of I talk a lot on here about marketing and business, and I get guests on who are experts in different areas of business. But one area that I do really think is worth focusing on and is incredibly valuable for people is mindset. So looking at different areas of mindset that need to be explored and that we often struggle with as business owners. Things like procrastination, imposter syndrome. Today, the topic is limiting beliefs. And actually, I wasn't really sure how the episodes that I've done previously, where I explored different kind of mindset issues like procrastination and confidence, would be received, but they're actually episodes that I get messages about the most, with people saying how much it's helped them and how useful it was for them. So today I wanted to discuss limiting beliefs, and the limiting beliefs that show up in this industry are very specific, very deeply rooted, and they do more damage to your business than almost anything external ever could. I'm not going to make this episode overly psychological, but I am going to name the exact beliefs I hear most often from practitioners, tell you why they exist, and give you something practical to do about them if it's something that you also are experiencing. That is it. Hopefully you find it useful, and hopefully it helps shift the way you think about things, so that you can show up more effectively in areas of your business. Let's get into it. Okay, firstly, let's talk about what a limiting belief actually is and why they are so damaging. So a limiting belief is simply a thought that you've had so many times and had reinforced so consistently by your environment that it started to feel like a fact rather than just a thought. It feels true. It feels like something you've discovered about yourself or the world through lived experience. But it isn't fact. It's a story that's been repeated until it stopped feeling like a story. The reason this matters so much is that your brain will always work to confirm what it already believes. If you believe you're not a business person, your brain will find evidence for that everywhere and filter out everything that contradicts it. If you believe people in your area won't pay premium prices, you'll unconsciously market yourself in ways that attract exactly the patients who won't. If you believe that putting yourself out there is embarrassing, you'll hold back just enough that you never build the kind of visibility that changes the way you think about that. The beliefs run underneath everything: the strategy, the content, the pricing, the decisions. And that's why working on them matters. Not because mindset is some fluffy concept, but because the ceiling you hit in your business is almost always built from the inside before anything limits you from the outside. What makes this particularly interesting for aesthetic practitioners is that your limiting beliefs often come from somewhere very specific, from your clinical training, from the culture of healthcare, from the professional values you were taught. And those are good values, but they've also created some beliefs that are holding you back in ways you probably haven't fully realised yet. So let's examine them. Limiting belief number 1, I'm a clinician, not a business person. This is probably the most common and the most damaging belief I come across in this industry, and it runs through almost everything. You trained as a nurse, a doctor, a dentist, a paramedic. You spent years, potentially decades, inside a system where your job was to treat patients according to clinical need. Business wasn't part of the conversation. Marketing wasn't part of the conversation. Pricing, sales, strategy, visibility. None of that was relevant to the role you were trained to do, and in many cases it would have felt actively inappropriate to bring it in. So you built a very strong professional identity around being a clinician, and that identity is real and it's something to be genuinely proud of. But when you moved into private aesthetics, that identity started to create an invisible wall, because now you're not just a clinician, you're also a business owner. You need to think about revenue, about marketing, about positioning, about growth. And every time you try to step into that space, something pulls you back. It feels like it's not really you, like you're performing a role that doesn't belong to you. Like the business side is something you have to suffer through in order to get back to the clinical work that you actually care about. And what happens is you underprice your services because pricing feels commercial, and that feels at odds with your values as a clinician. You hold back on selling because selling feels pushy, and that feels at odds with how you treat patients. You resist marketing yourself because marketing feels like self-promotion, and that feels at odds with the professional modesty you were trained to maintain. But here's what I want you to consider instead. Being a brilliant clinician and being an excellent business owner are not in conflict. They never were. The belief that they are is the limiting belief. Your clinical skills are the foundation of your business. Your business is the thing that makes it possible for you to use those skills at scale, to serve more patients, to build something sustainable, to have the resources to keep developing and training, to create the kind of environment where patients get genuinely excellent care. None of that happens if the business doesn't work. And the business doesn't work if you won't step fully into the role of running it. You are a clinician and a business owner. Both of those things are true, and the sooner you stop treating the second one as something that compromises the first, the more freely you'll be able to build something that actually reflects the standards you hold yourself to. Limiting belief number 2, my work should speak for itself. Oh, this one. This is the belief that keeps so many genuinely talented practitioners completely invisible. And it's sneaky because it sounds noble. It sounds like integrity. It sounds like the right way to run a high quality practice. The logic goes, if I'm good at what I do, patients will find me. Word of mouth will carry me. I don't need to be all over Instagram or talk about my results constantly. Good work speaks for itself. And there's something in this that isn't entirely wrong. Good work does matter, of course. It's the foundation of everything. Patients who feel genuinely well treated do refer people. Word of mouth is very real and very powerful. But here's what this belief doesn't account for. You can be the best practitioner in your area and still be consistently overlooked by your ideal patient if she simply doesn't know you exist. We're living in a world where patients have more access to information, more options, and more practitioners competing for their attention than ever before. The person who gets the booking isn't always the most skilled. They're often just the most visible, the most clearly positioned, and the most trusted based on the content they're putting out. It's not necessarily fair, but it's true. Your work can't speak for itself if the right people can't see it, and keeping quiet about what you do is leaving your ideal patients to find someone else. The practitioners who build consistently full diaries and genuinely thriving clinics are almost never the ones who wait. They're the ones who show up, who communicate their value consistently, who make it easy and obvious for the right people to find them and say yes. Visibility is how the people who need you actually find you. And it's kind of a non-negotiable if you're running a business in 2026. Limiting belief number 3. People in my area won't pay those prices. This is the pricing belief, and it's one of the most financially costly thoughts a practitioner can hold because it directly determines what you charge, which determines your income, which determines everything about what's possible in your business. Most of the time, this belief comes from projecting your own financial reality onto your patients. You look at your own bank account, your own relationship with money, your own sense of what feels like a lot to spend on a treatment, and you assume your patients are working with the same reference point. So you price based on what you would pay or what you'd feel comfortable paying rather than based on what the market actually supports. This is called projection bias, and it's human, understandable, and deeply unhelpful. But the reality is there are buyers at every price point in virtually every single market. The woman who spends £400 on a pair of shoes without second thoughts is not pricing her aesthetics appointments based on what you think feels like a lot. The business owner who flies business class and buys their children skiing holidays is not sitting at home thinking they can't justify spending more on their appearance than what you've decided they should. Your pricing sends a signal. It tells people what tier of experience they're in, what level of practitioner they're working with, what standard of care to expect. When you underprice your services, you're not making yourself accessible to more people. You're making yourself attractive to a different kind of patient, often one who is primarily motivated by cost, who is most likely to cancel, to shop around, to push back on your recommendations, and to not return when time gets tighter. Pricing for the right patient at the right level is not greedy, it's a positioning decision. And if you genuinely believe your work is excellent, your consultation is thorough, your care is genuine, then your pricing should reflect that. Because undercharging for good work doesn't serve anyone. It doesn't serve you, and it actually doesn't serve your patients, who are using price as one of the signals that tells them whether you're worth trusting with their face. The fix for this one is information. Look at what practitioners at a similar or higher level in comparable areas are charging. Look at the data rather than your feelings about it, and then ask yourself whether your prices are reflecting the genuine value of what you deliver, or whether they're reflecting a fear that you haven't fully come head to head with yet. Limiting belief number 4. I'm not good enough yet. This one lives in almost every practitioner I've ever spoken to at every level of experience and success. It shows up in someone with 2 years of experience and someone with 15. What it looks like in aesthetics specifically is not posting content because this one isn't quite right or the lighting isn't perfect or the before and after could be clearer. It looks like holding back on raising your prices until you're a little bit more experienced. It looks like not approaching a new clinic partnership or speaking opportunity because you haven't established yourself enough yet. It looks like qualifying every statement you make about your expertise with "I'm still learning" or "there are people far more experienced than me," even when you're genuinely excellent at what you do. It looks like draft after draft that never gets posted on social media, ideas that stay in your head, conversations you don't start because you're not sure you've earned the right yet. But here's what I want you to look at. You have trained. You have treated real patients. You have produced real and great results. You have people who trust you with their faces, who come back to you, who refer their friends and their sisters and their mothers. That is evidence, real tangible evidence that you are good enough. You're not perfect. Nobody is perfect. And there's always room to be better, but good enough to be doing this work and good enough to be doing it well. The problem isn't your skill level, it's that your definition of good enough keeps moving. Every time you reach what you thought it was, your brain shifts it further away. More training, more experience, more followers, more results, more proof. And because the goalposts keep moving, you never actually arrive at that feeling of being ready. Ready isn't a destination that you get to at one point or another. It's a decision that you make. And the belief replacement that helps most with this one is simple. When you catch your brain saying, "I'm not good enough yet," ask it one question. Good enough for what exactly? Because the evidence very often shows that you already are. Limiting belief number 5. Putting myself out there is embarrassing. This is the visibility belief, and it's closely related to the previous one, but it deserves its own conversation because it shows up in a very specific way for practitioners. There's a particular kind of professional restraint that runs through the medical world. You don't self-promote, you don't broadcast your opinions, you earn your reputation through your work and your relationships, and you let that speak for itself. Putting yourself loudly out into the world feels uncomfortable and borderline unprofessional for some people who came from that culture. And so when it comes to showing up on Instagram, posting reels with your face in them, sharing your opinions on things, talking directly to camera, there's a very real internal resistance. It feels exposing. It feels like showing off. It feels like you're inviting judgment from colleagues or peers who might not approve, or anyone else in the world that's watching for that matter. It feels very raw and vulnerable. Now, the thing is, this doesn't feel comfortable for anybody at first. There's genuinely no way around that part. Almost every practitioner I know who now shows up confidently online went through a period of posting and cringing, of overthinking everything they said, of worrying whether other practitioners would judge them for their content. But here's what's on the other side of that discomfort. A patient who finds you at 11 p.m. when she's been thinking about treatment for 6 months and finally feels ready and listens to your video and your words and feels like you really get her. Finally, she's found the person that understands what she's going through. A woman who's been burned by a practitioner before and has been watching your content for 3 months before she decides she trusts you enough to book. Or maybe a younger practitioner who sees your content and feels seen and less alone in the experience of building a business. The people who are judging you, who are genuinely judging you, and there will always be people that are judging you. There's probably someone listening to this episode right now and judging me. That's just the way of life. But the people who are judging you are not your patients. They never were. And the people who need what you offer genuinely cannot find you if you're invisible. Visibility isn't about being loud or self-promotional. It's about being findable and the version of you that shows up honestly, that talks about what you know, that shares your thinking and your perspective and your values. That version is the one who builds real trust over time, because people can't trust somebody they can't see and they can't hear. Okay, so we've explored the limiting beliefs. What do you do now? I want to give you something practical to work with, because I think understanding these beliefs is really useful, of course, but it's not enough on its own. The first thing is to start noticing. Just start catching yourself in the moments when a limiting belief shows up. When you go to post something and then don't. When you think about raising your prices and then talk yourself out of it. When you hold back from an opportunity because you've decided you're not ready. Just notice it, name it. That moment of recognition is more powerful than it sounds, because it creates a tiny bit of distance between you and the thought. It shifts you from inside the belief to observing it. The second thing is to ask yourself whether it's actually true. Not whether it feels true, whether there's any real evidence for it. Most of the time, when you look honestly at the evidence, the belief doesn't hold up. You have been booked, you have produced results your patients valued, you have done things that felt scary and survived them. That's all the evidence you need. So use it. The third is to replace the thought with something more accurate, not a false affirmation or something so positive it feels absurd, but something that's genuinely true and more useful. Not, I'm the best practitioner in the country, but I have the skills, the training, and the genuine care to do this work well and to keep getting better. That's true. And it's a much better thing to build from than whatever the limiting belief is telling you. And the fourth thing, and I think this is probably the most important, is to take the action anyway. Not after the fear goes away, because it doesn't tend to go away first. You take the action alongside the fear, and then the fear gets smaller and the action gets easier. And then you look back 6 months later, and what once felt impossible is now just something that you do without thinking twice. The practitioners who are building the kind of clinics and careers that others look at and feel inspired by are not the ones who felt completely confident and ready from the start. They're the ones who kept going even when they didn't. That's it. That is the whole thing. So I'll leave you with this. The ceiling you're hitting in your business right now is probably not external. It's probably not your location or your competition or the market or the economy. It's almost certainly something inside of you, a belief that's been running underneath everything else, telling you what you're capable of and what you're not. And that's good news, because the external things are much harder to change than the internal ones. A belief, once you see it clearly, can be challenged, it can be replaced, it can stop running your decisions. You have the clinical skills, you have the dedication, you have the values that make a genuinely excellent practitioner. The only question is whether your internal narrative is keeping pace with all of that, or whether it's still telling you a story about who you are that was formed a long time ago and stopped being true sometime since. If this episode was helpful to you or resonated with you, I'd love for you to share it with another practitioner who you think needs to hear it. And if you want more on the business and mindset side of building a clinic that actually works, make sure you're following and subscribe to the podcast so you get notified when the next episode goes live. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.